So thank you everybody for coming out on a school day, and thank you to those people who've logged on Zoom. I'm looking at that direction of the Zoom and that direction, but most of all, thank you to Abi for coming here for this book that I think we should clap to start. I'm very excited about this event, and I wanted to feel informal for those at home and those here, because most of us have read the book, and that is a very beautiful thing. So we're all in on it. It's not us and you. We're going to have questions, and we're also invested in your book, Abi. It is heartbreaking and hopeful at the same time, which is quite an achievement. Yeah. And I can't wait to hear some of the questions. So I think let's just hear from you with a little bit of background. Some people may have already looked this up, but how did the book come to life?
Thank you all for coming on a weekday, school day, work day. It really means a lot to me. Thank you. So the story of Adunni, the girl with the louding voice, I think it's a story that has followed me all my life. I think we all carry stories. There's something always turns that story on and causes it to pour out of you. And I think for me, it was the fact that I was born in Lagos in Nigeria, and I lived in a middle-class family. I didn't want for anything. So I wasn't born into poverty. I went to very good schools. But all around me, there were girls, especially girls and boys, but especially girls working as housemaids. And one or two of them even worked for my family. And I remember wondering, as I was going off to boarding school, wondering why the girl that worked for my family, who was around about my age or maybe a year older, would stay behind and continue to work. And sometimes I'll come back from school and she'll be gone. And so I had questions, but I didn't ask those questions because I was brought up in a time where you don't really ask questions of the adults. That has changed now, thankfully. And then fast forward sort of 18 years later, I was in the UK, had my own daughter, and as it is when you have your own children, and they get to that age, when my daughter was 8, and she got to that age where it was not common to see young girls as maids. So having an 8-year-old and asking her to help with the dishwasher and her throwing a tantrum. We talked about this. And so she was throwing this tantrum that evening. And I believe I've said this to her a lot of times, but for some reason that evening, I said to her, look, there are young girls like you who are working and don't have the luxury that you have. And my daughter said, well, if they're working, they get paid because you get paid, so you make money. And so we then had to sit down and I told her about the girls like Adunni. And so my daughter said to me, well, Mom, why would anyone send their daughter to be a maid? Would you ever send me to be a maid? And I think that was the very first time that all the questions I had. So who are these girls that work for families? What is their story? How did they become a maid? Do they have dreams? I had an 8-year-old then who wanted to draw and sing and do all these things. And these girls want to do that. And so I thought I had to write this story. But at the same time, I was doing my master's in creative writing, and I had to hand in very quickly 3,000 words. And I had been sharing a lot of stories, and the feedback I kept on getting was that my stories lacked character. So I thought I will show them what character is. I would write the story of this girl, just 3,000 words. I was not thinking about a book, just 3,000 words, introduction into her life. Young girl was about to get married, and she doesn't want to get married, and that's the end. And so I wrote it in Adunni's voice, and I sent it in to my supervisor. And so I went to see him the next week later, and he said, this is incredible. Can you get a book out of this? And I said, there's no way that's going to happen because I've invented this voice, and I can only do 3,000 words of it. So that's sort of how we came to do. So he encouraged me to keep writing, and I did.
I mean, so that inspiration as a parent, the only nice man in the book is Kofi, who's the chef. And we were wondering, well, was he just a nice guy, or is it the fact it's mentioned that he's got a daughter the same age? But then Big Madam has children. So, you know, it wasn't enough Big Madam to be a mother and not make that connection. There is such a disconnect, isn't there, between being a good person, because I'm sure Big Madam thinks she just thinks it's okay. Do you think, I'm going to jump straight ahead, I've got other questions before it, but this whole system of somebody thinks they are better and that they can treat them like that, is that, and that happens all around the world. I mean, every country has done that at some point. It's usually money. Money brings power and status. But do you think there has been the impact of colonialism? And did that introduce the idea, or was it always there?
I think that there might have been, I think the impact of colonialism is huge there.
Certainly in bringing that poverty.
Absolutely, and the divide. I think even looking back at my past now and how the middle class has slowly disappeared, and I think it's across the world actually. There's a huge gap between the wealthy and the extremely poor. But there's also the fact that when you are part of a system and very close to that system, it's very difficult for you to be able to see the flaws in that system. And I think majority of the characters that Adunni comes to see or Adunni goes away from have all been part of a system. And they expect that they realize that the way things are happening to them, they don't see the problems with that system. So it takes coming out of it. And so Kofi is somebody that is sort of detached, but at the same time can see things from a far angle and kind of weighing onto that. So I think, but also the fact that he has a daughter, and he and Adunni get to be quite close in a way that other people might not have given her the chance. So I think if you look at the story, the people that are close enough to Adunni, I think it's just talking about the way you are until you really get to know someone. You judge them and you make assumptions about them and you discard them sometimes. And I think if you look at the story, the people that are close enough to Adunni are really the ones that make the biggest difference in her life. So the likes of Kofi, the likes of Tia, the likes of Iya in the village, and some of her friends. They are the ones that really get to know who she is and can share a sense of the wonder of her character as a person.
What a wonderful character. But I think that the one of the beauties of the book, actually, just so that everyone here knows, this is my third book club this week, because we met Monday, we met Wednesday, we're here today. I am living and breathing this book. And one of the things that we've said was how beautifully subtle it was, because in another book with another author, they may have said, here comes Tia, she'll save the day. I can't have a child, you're a child, let me take you away. It wasn't like that. Tia is such a cool character, because she's, well, that's not right. I can sort this out. And say it's Kofi, they don't instantly, she gets on his nerves at the beginning of it, and then you see it building. There's so much. It's really very interesting that your tutor originally said you don't do character, you have definitely come back on character. So you obviously started with Adunni, who is the centre of all of this. Which characters did you really enjoy, and which ones just appeared out of nowhere?
I really loved writing Big Madame because she made me laugh. I remember writing it and just laughing at the descriptions of her makeup, and I was thinking that is so crazy. What you're trying to do here. So I enjoyed writing her, but I also enjoyed trying to. So when I first wrote Big Madame's character, she was very sort of one-dimensional. She was all bad over. Well, she's still bad. But I think just trying to get to the end and getting feedback from the editors that Abi, everybody has a story. So Big Madame she can't just be born evil and just die evil. So let's have a build. So trying to find gaps in the story to try to let there be a bit of a connection between her and Adunni, even if it's for 5 seconds, that human connection that we all have. And even though it might just die very quickly, but it's there. And so trying to explore that was fun to write. Characters that popped out of nowhere. Kofi did pop out of nowhere.
At least he did.
Yeah, he did. And I think it was because there's this huge debate between Nigerians and Ghanaians about jollof rice, Nigerian jollof rice. And at the time, I think President Obama, he might have visited an African country, and so they were asking you which was better, jollof, Ghanaian jollof or Nigerian jollof. And I thought, Abi, why don't you have a Ghanaian chef and just get this whole thing off? And so that's the whole point. But then I just thought, you can't just have a chef there who's Ghanaian because of Ghanaian jollof in Nigeria. It doesn't make any sense. So give him more of a role. And I thought somebody who's an outsider who comes from, just like Tia, somebody who's come into a different environment would always understand what it feels like to be alone. And so I thought that would be a good connection. His family is not there. And we said with Tia, who has lost something as well, who wants something that she doesn't have. So bringing those, I think loss sort of pulls us together in different ways. I was just trying to tie that.
It's beautifully described.
Sorry, Jack. Leaving you at the back.
Are you?
Yeah,
Gosh.
a little bit more.
Okay. I've got quite a loud voice already, so how does that sound loud?
You're louding this.
Yeah.
All be louder. So as I was reading the book, I did wonder if Big Madam could read. And then, believe me, I've read this book 3 times, and I still can't remember. Does she read the letter at the end, or is it read to her? And can she read?
No, yeah, she can read. Oh, she's very, very she's very articulate. Yeah.
I kind of got the feeling that maybe, as I was reading, I was thinking, well, maybe that's going to be the bit of why she's so mean. But
She's just mean.
uh,
No, she can read. I'm trying to think about the letter. I don't remember what I haven't gone back to read this since. But I can't remember what I put in there towards the end. But I know that I'm not sure if she read the letter. Did she read the letter? So she knows what's in the letter. But she knows the story. She knows what happened to Rebecca. And she understands that as a woman, and I think that was the point I was trying to make, that as a woman, so forget about Big Madame's behavior for a second. Let's look at the fact that she's educated and successful, and she has a husband that is a disgrace. And it's more important for her to protect that man and her marriage than it is to protect the vulnerable young people. And that's the point that I was trying to make in that, as to how society has, especially within Nigeria and Africa, how the woman is constantly needing to struggle to be seen and be into society.
I mean, the title is brilliant. I think it absolutely, and there are so many little subtle quotes about finding your voice and allowing voice as we go through. At what point did you know that was the title? I mean, your schooling is your voice. It will be speaking for you, even if you didn't open the one mouth at all. It's just so beautiful. When did the title come?
I had so many horrendous titles before then. I had one of them was called The Nobody Girl, and then I wrote it and I thought she's far from a nobody. It felt like Adunni was saying to me, "Don't you dare call me a nobody girl." So I think I finished writing, and the essay that Adunni wrote, she titled it that. And so I got to the end and I thought, okay, all the titles I had in my head didn't make sense. And I thought, well, I can't go, it's
Right there.
And sometimes it happens as a creative, what you're looking for is right there in front of you. And so I just used that.
I mean, it almost feels so perfect. It's almost like the title came first and then the story grew out of it. But I love some of the description. I mean, Adunni is brilliantly funny as well, isn't it? She's got such tenacity and humour. But I like the one when she described the big pants hanging on, pants hanging on, laughing at her, and she always keeps that character. I presume there are some stories where the maids do have quite a nice life. When
Yes. I met a maid who is here now in England actually. She lived with a wonderful, wonderful woman who educated her, brought her to England, and she started her own family. And we were very good friends. But she's like one in many. And I think that's what I'm trying to change. And because if you're part of, let me just talk about one of my very good friends here. She lived in Nigeria as well. And when she read my book, she called me and she was crying. And she's a wonderful, wonderful friend of mine. She has a good heart. She gives to charity and all of that. But she called me crying because she said, Abby, for the first time, I suddenly realized that I did not know my housemate's surname. I have an 11-year-old that, is grade 8 in music. And I take her to music lessons and I don't remember ever celebrating my housemate's birthday. And she goes, but I'm not a bad person. But how could this have happened? And my mom called me. My mom was like, was I like that? Was I like that? I'm like, no, she's like, are you writing about me? Like, no. What I'm trying to say is that sometimes, it's going back to what I'm saying, when you're part of a system and you're used to certain things, you don't realize. And that's what I was trying to do with the story is because you don't know a person, it's easy for you to discard them as anything. So going into Adunni and bringing her to life and ensuring and giving her the kind of voice that she has, it forces her on you, it forced her on me, because I wanted to see and know what these girls might have been like. And that was why I sort of wrote the book. So, sadly, yes, there are a few good, stories, but majority is not great. A lot of these girls do not have a good life.
So the message, I mean, you are the girl that allowed the voice, because I think it's a brave book, because you are writing about you know, the world that you have come from, and your mum, even your mum said, uh-oh, is this about me? So were you very nervous about your own mother reading it?
I didn't even think she was going to read it, to be honest. When you write,
That's good though. You should read like no one's watching you dance.
if I had a premonition that all of this would happen, I might not have done anything before. Because I remember that, so yeah, I submitted it for my thesis and my lecturer said it was amazing. And then I put into this Bath Novel Award, which was judged anonymously, which is why I did it. Because I thought nobody would knock on my door. And then I won. And by winning, you know, everything else happened. And so I did not think about anything until I think this. So my book was published in February, and in December I was packing to go on holiday with my family, and I just started to cry because I was like, oh my gosh, in a month, in 2 months' time, everybody's gonna come for me. I don't think I'm ready for this. And so my husband was like, well, you can tell them it's too late, they're just gonna kill you, that's it. And so as I was doing that, I came across an Instagram feed. And it was a girl, I think 8-year-old is about the age that these, you know, between 8 and sort of 16, 18. I think she was 8 or 9, and she was crying and she was bleeding from her scalp. And the person recording the video said, well, this is a housemaid that I've recorded, and the woman who employed her has sort of smashed a bottle on her head. And guys, we need to do something about this. And there were millions of comments, thousands of comments on from Nigerians saying, yes, stop. And I think seeing that video, and I thought, Abby, you're doing the exact thing you're supposed to be doing. So I wiped my tears and I went on to
you know, we all know it's not enough to be whatever, you've got to call things out. So your message is going out to lots of different people. I think it's going out to Europeans who may not even know about this, but it's going out to Nigerians. And I mean, which has been tricky? Which were you most nervous about? I suppose going out to Nigeria.
Yes, I one of the first few book clubs I joined, I got an email from this lady. She says, we're a group of cerebral Nigerian women and we'd like to interview you. So I said, okay, right, bring it on. Yes, well, soon, thankfully, my mother had a pandemic, so I'm like, at least you can't reach me or anything. So I got into the call, and there were about 60 or 70 women across the world, very brilliant, very smart, very accomplished women doing amazing things. And at first I was like, any questions? And there was a barrage of questions. And why would you write this? But then as we began to dialogue and speak, it's incredible because from dialoguing and speaking to them, a few of them said, actually, I know a few people in Parliament and I will do something. I will write letters and I'll make sure there's a change. And I think that's what it is. I think it's understanding the intention. And that's why it was hard to find a balance because the issue of child labor and child marriage is a global issue. But I'm Nigerian, so I'm telling the story that I know. And in speaking to different people across the world, I've spoken to people from the United States, from the Philippines, from Thailand. They have stories like this. So, so that was the first thing to say, like, this is not a Nigerian issue. This is a global issue, but I'm Nigerian, so I'm telling the Nigerian story.
By the way, there are sweatshops in the UK as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the labor line, the child labor line, I think it is called, there's 7,000 calls that go onto that line every day in the United Kingdom. 7,000. So there is a global problem here. But I'm Nigerian, so I'm telling the Nigerian story. And also understanding the intention of the writer is not, I'm not here to say, I'm here holding up my hand and saying, I've been through this. We had a maid, right? So we need to do something about it. And I think part of it was from me also going back to Nigeria and seeing young girls still as maids and me wanting to ask them questions and being a bit scared to do that because I'm afraid that they might lose their jobs and get in trouble. So my best bet was to write a book and hopefully create change in my own way.
It'd be wonderful if that has happened. I mean, reading the book, there are a few. Can everybody still hear? I'm conscious that there are references. Louder, even louder. Yeah. Okay, there are references in the book at the year, and every time I heard somebody say, and then she unloaded the dishwasher, or I love the books that she found as well, the Collins Dictionary, the book of that Nigerian facts. But the date is there, 2014. It's so hard to believe how current that was. But I love the books that she found, and I love the fact she took a long time dusting them, which I knew at the bookshop. So the main character for me in the book is the omnipresent mother, who is constantly referred to, and I think lots of us here have had mothers or our mothers or our maybe daughters or sons, but the mother is so important. So I wanted to ask, as much as you're willing to share about you and your mother, but I think from what you're saying, you're probably more influenced by you as a mother, because the mother's the hero.
Yeah. I think my mom played it. She's still there. I mean, she called me on the way here. So, where are you going today? I'm like, going to culture. Oh, right, she prayed for me. All the best. Say great things, you know. My mom is
mentioned me.
my mom is such a huge part of my life. And you know, I mean, I dedicated the book to her. She single-handedly educated myself and my brother. And as a single mom growing up in that environment, especially in the 90s, there's a lot of stigma. And she's done very well with her career, becoming the first female professor of taxation in Nigeria. She's actually the first professor of taxation. But she has to use the word female because people might come for her. Some men might come for her. So that's, you know, she's fought many battles. And all through my life, coming into England to study sort of 22 years ago, 21 to 22 years ago now, having her say to me, Abby, I'm sending you forth, like, make me great, right? I'm putting everything in you and then I'm letting you go, but do not let me get a phone call about you that will make me cry, you know. So and if you've ever been an international student, it's thousands and thousands of pounds, and having to convert that from Nigerian naira into pounds was something that was at the back of my head. So in a way, when I was writing Adunni's story and her mom, thinking this is my mom, her voice at the back of my head was with me every step of the way, and still is with me.
It's so evident. She is there on every plan.
Yeah.
But also you as a mother.
Yes.
And I think there's a kind of naivety, not naivety, there's an innocence in the story. And you know, you're saying that a lot of adults are still having maids, they're still not really seeing the problem, but to see it from a child's point of view is a really good way in. And you as a mother, you've obviously been influenced by your girls.
Absolutely. I think, well, my 2-year-old, I stole a lot of her vocabulary from the things like she would say then, things like tomorrow, after tomorrow, is it? Tomorrow. That was my daughter at that time. And things like expect all. I think I do need to say that. She says that. But I think also the relationship between mother and daughter, they teach me things, and I'm trying very, and especially in the age that they are in social media and all that, and trying to impact knowledge and trying to shape them to grow up to be respectable women and to have respect for elders, and just to instill good discipline in them, and still have that love relationship. That has really shaped my life and my story in writing the book, and speaking to my daughter then and asking her questions as I was writing the novel, the older one. It was such an incredible thing. And to see the book come out and for her to see the growth of the novel has just been also a wonderful thing.
And I think it's really evident that you sort of researched it through your daughter's eyes, perhaps.
Yes.
Adunni is such a complete character. You are always aware of her age, even though she does horrific things or has to do horrible adult chores and endures other things. You really always feel that she is a young person. So the language, you just mentioned the language. I naively, I think, but I'm hoping you'll correct me or teach us all, I thought it was pidgin English. But when I met Lola from Lagos, who knows you, which was very weird, as I sat next to Lola, she went, no, it is not pidgin English, because pidgin English has got its own grammatical rules, which makes it a language. This was, well, we know Adunni's intelligent, but we also know she's uneducated, and the language was to show that, wasn't it?
Yes. It was a few things. So when I first came to the UK, I was working, I'm not going to say where I was working, but I was working, and I might have said in other book clubs, so I'll just say I was working for a jewelry shop, and I had to really learn about diamonds. And because I love education, I push everything too far. So I really studied diamonds so that I could sell. So and we had a few customers come in and they wanted to buy diamonds to propose or whatever. And I would really talk about the diamond. the clarity and the 4 C's and all of that. And I'll say all of these things and I go, wow, you speak so well, you speak very good English. Where are you from? What has that got to do with diamonds? And then they'll go on with, well, you're very intelligent, you're very smart. So that's kind of followed me for a while before I wrote the book, was how well you speak English and how smart you are. What's the relationship? And so when I started to write this novel, I really made the conscious choice to try to have a character that is intellectually smart, but is not able to express herself in English language. As there are millions of people across the world like that, and who are looked down upon for some reason because they might not be able to speak very good English. So that was, and then 2, Pidgin English is spoken by everybody. In majority of people. So regardless of how educated you are, you can speak Pidgin English. It's a form of English itself that has, like I said to you, it has its own sort of grammar and all of that. But Adunni can speak Pidgin English, but she's inventing words because she is doing a literal translation of her mother tongue into English, because that's how she thinks and expresses herself. And because she's so obsessed with the English language, because she thinks it will give her that's kind of respect and the wonder that she thinks exists in English language. She tries very hard to continue to speak it, and that's when she sort of says to Miss Tia, and one of the scenes where she says communication my English or something like that. There's that scene there where she's just trying to really prove a point, and then she gets to the end and she realizes that actually Rebecca, who is intelligent, who speaks English, is not very smart. So there's that.
I mean, as I was reading it, like everybody here, you're reading on a bus, you're reading on a train, and it was always when I didn't have a pen, but I wanted to make a note of some of the languages. But one day I had a pen, and it was using her nostrils to be collecting all the heating. It's so beautiful, and it's kind of correct, but just, but the language changes as it goes on.
Yeah.
Which is such clever writing. And did you write it and then go back and go, oh, I'll make that a little bit more loose and make this bit tighter, because it seems to flow.
Yes.
Change it.
So at first I stopped writing so when I got to a point where I thought, okay, now Adunni should sound like she's a little bit more educated. So I stopped and I started to write, and I realized that I was very quickly slipping into Abi by doing that. So the things that should be a wonder to Adunni were no. So the fact that she gets better at speaking English, I didn't want her to lose her sense of wonder at the littlest things. And so that didn't work. So I ended up going back to finishing the novel. And then I put a mark in the manuscript, and I began so every 5 lines or so, I'll tweak 1 or 2 words. And then after every 5 lines, maybe every 4 lines, and then every 3 lines. And I did that till the end, so that, because realistically, even if you're coming into learning a language for the first time, and even if you have a flair for languages, you still can't grasp it as quickly, unless you're exceptionally gifted. So there will still be some errors here and there, and it's just showing that. And it's not until obviously she's able to get back into school and fully get her education that she'll be able to sort of converse as fluently as she should.
So the program that she is applying for throughout the book, are there many programs like that? Did you research one that you know of?
I did research. There are a lot of NGOs, so there are a lot of charities that educate. I didn't find anything dedicated to maids, and I'm hoping to change that. I'm in conversations, trying to look for a way to change that. But I think for me, the biggest change would be, even if there are programs in there, there's a mindset shift that needs to occur, because one of my aunties called me, and she said, oh, I have a maid, and she's so smart. She can't read, but she's read your book. She said, my auntie said, I don't understand how, because I know she's never been to school, but she's read your book and she loves your book, and I want to send her to school. And this is what I'm telling you, because my aunt said, I want to send her to school, but I'm scared. I'm scared that if I do that, her parents would take her away from her, because they need her salary to survive. So the problem here is there's a poverty issue, and there's a mindset shift that needs to happen. So what I'm trying to figure out is, as a personal project of mine, is trying to figure out how to have a conversation or a meeting point between the people that employ maids, the parents that rely on the salary of the maids, and the maid herself or himself, and figure out how to talk to schools and institutions, see how we can find somewhere in a middle ground where that child, hopefully you're not employing a child, but if, there are millions that are being employed right now. So how do we get that child to get an education so that she's able to go to school maybe between 8 and 3, and come back, have a rest, and maybe do some chores? And I don't know how to solve it, but it's something I really want to do.
There are so many steps, because even with an education, where do they then put it? If there's still poverty, poverty is,
It is a beast.
It's a beast, definitely. The story is important. It's political. It's got a message, but at the heart of the story is a page turner. Where's Rebecca? What happened to Rebecca? And I thought that was amazing writing again, because it's a story, and an exciting story. And it reminded me, every time anyone who's into books hears the name Rebecca, most people would say, book Rebecca, you instantly go Jackie Du Maurier. And in the book Rebecca, the narrator in Rebecca, we never know her name, but Rebecca is the one who's never there. Have you read Rebecca?
It's one of my favorite books.
So did you pick that name?
I think, like I said about, a creative on your subconscious, I think you just leave there. Yeah, because I don't think about names. I mean, I recently sent something to my agent. She's like, Abby, you have every character here, their name starts with letter A. It's like, I didn't realize, just change it. So you don't realize, you just put names in. When I'm writing, I don't think that this is what the character is going to be called, but I think now that you're not the first person to say that. Somebody else interviewed me and asked me that question, and I realized that is so true. I think it's because I love Rebecca. It's one of my favorite books, and there's this air of mystery around this Rebecca, and I thought, okay, perfect.
Because we run several book clubs, I usually get all the really intelligent questions on the Monday, and I fog them off on the Wednesday. This one really was my question. That's interesting, well spotted. But that is one of your favourite words. Tia is a brilliant character as well. Did it have to be so bad for her at the end?
Again, I think it's important for Adunni to see that getting an education does not absolve you from the realities of being a woman in Nigeria. And the truth is that there are many women who are very successful, very accomplished and all that. They still deal with things that they probably should not be dealing with. But also it was important for them to have a shared sense of grief and loss, so that it could sort of bind them together as well. So, I mean, did it have to be so bad for her? Yes. But the ritual I thought would be a bit weird.
Yeah.
But
I wasn't prepared for how physically it was.
So that happened to somebody I know, and she gave me permission to tell that story. And that's because she's very accomplished, very educated, and they had this issue, and she almost exactly what happened with Tia. She's like, okay, I'm gonna go for it because
keeps the mother-in-law.
Yes, so everybody would not say that it's my fault,
Yeah.
and I'm not willing to try everything else. Medical science is not always the answer. There might be other things, so let's do that. And it happened.
So you are writing from your truth, aren't you? You really are. And again, a great twist with Ken. There's a little twist there for anyone who hasn't finished it, but I'm sure you all have. Your schooling is your voice, it will be speaking to you. Right, we have done that. There are some beautiful images, again, of the mother, of music and water. It seems to be a few references. And there's one where she's remembering her mom, and she's feeling fearful, and she said, listen to the music within that feeling, the water. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but some of the images are lovely. Is music important to you? And do you remember the water bits? Do you remember writing?
I think for me, writing has a sound. When I'm writing, I try to listen to the beats and the lyrics and the rhythm. And Adunni's voice certainly to me was like music. Her voice sings. And when I'm writing and I don't hear the singing or the sound or the rhythm in what I'm writing, I don't release that work. I don't feel it's good enough. So I think maybe that's where that came from, and me just sort of trying to crystallize the music in Adunni's voice and putting it on page as music as well. Do I listen to a lot of music? Not really actually. But I just think writing is a bit like song. It's a bit like singing.
Somebody else had said that they read it aloud to themselves at the beginning to get the rhythm, and they absolutely felt it came to life as they got the words out their own mouth. Would you read it to me? I mean, not a long one because we're going to have questions, but this was the bit with the water and the just from here, because
So there was the end, right?
wow, wherever you go. I mean, you can just do that little bit, just to hear your rhythm.
When my mama sensed my fear, she climbed down to where I was sitting and pulled me to my feet and pressed my face into the soft and wet of her stomach. Adunni, she shouts, have no fear. Listen to the wonder of it. Listen to the music in the noise. So I listen and listen until my ears catch a song in the noise, a blowing of 1,000 trumpets mixing with the beats of 100 drums. And just like that, there is no more fear. And soon, me and my mama, we begin to laugh and dance under the water.
As a bookseller, I don't want anyone to ever listen to Audible, but I bet that is good as a because the language and the voice is so beautiful. I think Bernadette is here, and she had two amazing questions. And they're very simple ones, but we are all very invested. So what did Adunni do next? I mean, that is a huge question. And you may say, I don't know yet, because the story's not there. But I actually read it so slowly, this book, so I didn't want anything bad to happen to her. I was like, I can't remember bad. So do you know what happened?
So when I'm asked this question, you might have heard me, if you listen to any of my interviews, I'll tell you the answer. So my mother, who is a professor of taxation and she's a chronic academic, and has not read a word of fiction in about 30 years. So she came down, she flew down from Lagos for my book launch, and she took the book home, and pandemic caught her at home, because I don't think she'd have read the book, but she was in the pandemic, she couldn't go out to lecture, so she started to read my book. And so she finished it and she called me, I was in the middle of a Zoom meeting, I was about to jump onto a Zoom thing, and she was like, I've read your book, but I don't think it's finished. So I was like, okay, so you did a great job. I said, okay. She's like, this is what I think needs to happen. And she goes and tells me everything she thinks. She explains the whole thing. And she's talking, I'm trying to join my Zoom call, so I'm not listening to my mom. And she said, bye. And I said, bye. And then I hung up. And I kid you, 5 minutes later, she sends an email. I know you were not listening. This is exactly what needs to happen. So she tells me exactly what needs to happen. So when anybody asks me this question, I say to them, my mother's told me what needs to happen. I just need to find the time to write it.
I think that's a perfect ending. You can all then imagine. And then people are also, because we're invested, what happens to her family? Do we know? Does your mum know? Do we need
My
to get
mom
on to
knows. So wait and see.
We'll wait and see. But there are so many bits to the story. I mean, my questions are pretty much done, and the whole point of this is that we are all in it together. We may have questions on Zoom. Tell them if you're there, you can send questions. Please be brave, because this is not an us and you. There's a question.
Did you have any trouble getting published, or was it one of those immediately snatched up?
So I had written a few things that had been rejected quite badly. So I was suffering from, I feel terrible kind of feeling. So when I was doing this, I sent it to one or two literary agents, and one of them came back to say that they didn't see it on any shelf at all. So they didn't know where to place it, and so I decided to go into this this literary competition thing, and I won that. But I think winning that was just the catalyst for everything, because it's a well-publicized competition, and so I had publishers sort of sending me messages after that to say, can we see the manuscript?
The reason I asked is because I remember in the book festival, Andrea Levy saying she kept being told there was no market.
Yeah,
books
yeah,
like
I
really.
had that. I had that.
And it was astonishing, and but of course with the competition which I haven't really had. Thank you.
I haven't heard that, but of all the mediums, you can't see who's written. So first of all, everyone should have a level playing ground, and actually beyond that, everybody should have a level playing ground. How awful to hear that.
Yeah, I know, it was, yeah, we don't see where this would be placed on the shelves. I was like, well, put it on a wooden shelf, I don't know. But that was so discouraging, and because this wasn't my first attempt at writing, so I just thought, you know what, I'm just gonna go in for, and that's why I went for the Bath Nobel Award, and I have a relationship with them because they're incredible, and that's because it's judged anonymously, so your name is not on the manuscript. Even though I knew that this is such a distinct book, they would probably know the author is from Africa somewhere, but at least my name would not sort of, I don't know, I just felt like the doors might be closed before I even get to the door. See what I mean? So winning that out of almost 2,000 entries was just an incredible thing for me, and I couldn't have had it a better way.
Emma.
I was just wondering, going back a bit before presentation, was it difficult to get from a 3,000-word essay to this novel? How was that process for you?
It was scary because because my supervisor is somebody that I respected and still respect, and having him say, look, Abby, you need to do this, I really believe in this, and I don't say that often. So I took that tiny piece of words, huge piece of advice, and I would show up every single, I wrote for practically every day for like 6 years. I had a full-time job and 2 kids. I was writing like a nutcase because I felt that I had to capture the voice and get it all out. And so for sort of the 6 to 8 months, I refused to read anything that was written in standard English. I would sometimes send emails at work in Adunni's voice. So I tried to keep her in my head, and it was intensely challenging to be able to do that, but it was a delicious challenge. I enjoyed it, but it was tough.
A delicious challenge. I love it. I knew you had a question.
So there's a lot that I love and recognise in storytelling.
You speak up a little bit, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was going to
don't
the
have
question.
that voice.
Sorry, yeah.
So there's a lot that I love and recognise in the book. For me, one of the biggest points of recognition were the sibling relationships, and I'm just wondering how you got there. Where did they come from? What did you observe?
So either Abby or I will repeat the question. Are you happy to repeat that? So the question was, Janu very much enjoyed the book and was very interested in the sibling relationships. And I think, Abby, you're an only child, aren't you?
No, I have a brother.
Oh,
And we
so
don't
tell us about siblings.
we had a horrible relationship. It wasn't the same. At a point, I think he lied to me that I was adopted. And my mom was like, but then as we got older, he just became my #1 fan. Like, he would drop everything to support me and just saying that. But I think for Adunni and her siblings, is she has an older brother that she's not very close to, and I think maybe that might have come from mine. I hope my brother doesn't know that. But I think she's such, as somebody who's sort of 14 and quite maternal and very protective over her brother, I just wanted to explore it from that way. It wasn't anything that had been inspired, maybe between my 2 children, because there's sort of a 5-year gap between them. But I just wanted to explore that maternal side of Adunni because her mother had sort of instilled that love within her and that her younger brother. So maybe that was it. It wasn't anything I was consciously doing, I'll say.
It's so well observed.
Oh,
Thank you. I really recognise it. I think there is a cultural link in terms of, so I'm Bengali, and in my culture, parenting is very shared, and I think that you definitely see that in the story. But there's also the responsibility that she feels for you is so beautiful.
So Janu was just saying how much she recognised certain traits of Bengali background and that protectiveness over a sibling is important. Thank you. Shannon.
Yeah, just following on from some of what was said earlier, do you think you would write any more books about Adunni?
Well,
So the question is, would Abby write any more books with Adunni?
I think Adunni is such a force that I think when she wants to be written about, I think she'll sort of bang my head. People need to hear from me again.
Amazing.
An amazing character. So either Adunni or your mother are going to make you do something. Wendy.
what inspired you to use the facts about Nigeria? Because I thought some of them are really enlightening and actually really added value to your book.
Thank you so much. I think that one was the fact that Adunni, being a curious, intelligent mind, I thought, why would she go to Lagos and not learn anything apart from suffer? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I wanted to figure out something that she would learn. So at first I thought, okay, she comes across the dictionary. So it was the dictionary at first, but I thought that's so boring. Like, she reads definitions, like anybody can do that. And so I thought, why don't I try to, because this is a book that very much talks about poverty. And it was important for me not to tell a single story about Nigeria as being the hub of poverty. Yes, there's extreme poverty, but there's a lot of wealth, and it's not all bad. And so trying to use the facts was a way for me to educate myself, educate Adunni, and educate my readers about something interesting and different about Nigeria that is not just down to the fact that there's poverty and there's suffering and all of that. And so, but because the idea came after I finished the book and there was no way I was going to rewrite the whole thing, I had to look for facts that were sort of correlated to something I've written in that chapter. So I would look at a chapter and try and figure out what is this chapter saying? Okay, this chapter talks about having twins. So what's an interesting fact about twin children in Nigeria? And then I'll figure out, and it's a very exciting thing for me to do because I was on Google for days. This is and I have so many facts and I have to sort of find the perfect ones.
And authors love to procrastinate.
The chapter one particularly really.
Yes, oh yes, that's a thing.
So we've got a question from Nell, a question up there, I think it's Lorraine, and then a question here. So, we got a few. Okay, so trying to steal questions and say them really loudly so I don't have to repeat them, and then we try and get everyone in. So Nell.
So in the same way that there are multiple stories in your book, there are multiple audiences for your book. And I wonder whether you were writing, because you've been in England a long time, I think, once you wrote it, were you writing with a Nigerian audience in your head or a British audience or an audience? Did you have that thought? Because especially the Nigerian facts thing kind of fits, doesn't it? You're educating some people, but maybe you're educating everyone.
Yes, I think first of all it was my audience of one to start with, because like I said, I was doing it for my master's, but when I knew that it would be published and I was editing it, I began to think about who would mostly benefit from this. The truth is, the people that benefit from it, as much as Adunni's story is about a housemaid and all of that, there's also a universal story, about rejection, about assumptions, about not giving up on your dreams, about pushing. And so in the end, I decided to not really think about one audience and just write the story from my heart, because if you try to do that, you find that you're boxing yourself into a corner. And having said that, now I've spoken to so many people, and people pick things from the story that I had no idea. I had a grandmother, a wonderful grandmother from the United States, write to me. She sacrificed her education to raise her 5 children. And now she's taking care of their children. And she's like, Abi, I've sacrificed all my life. But I read your book and I realized it doesn't matter. I can still go back and pursue my education. So that's a woman that I did not even think about, never would have in a million years. But she's taking something for you. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about writing is people take from it what they would. And my job is just to make sure that I'm putting the best one out there.
Beautiful. We are all Adunni. Lorraine.
It made me think of attachment therapy.
Oh, wow.
So that's another sort of side to it. Also, it made me think what a wonderful film or play it would make.
Yes.
And I really cared about what happened to her. Like you, I was anxious that please let her be okay. So that's wonderful to feel such empathy for a character. It shows what an amazing writer you are.
Thank you so much.
The love is real.
Thank
So
you.
we're going to bounce from there to there to there. Yes.
Okay, thanks for taking my question. I absolutely adored the book. It was a page turner. I read it over a weekend. It was amazing. I should say I used to live in Nigeria for 5 years. So when I was reading it, it was the language which really came to me, and I could hear the voice. For me, I just can't imagine how difficult it must have been to have written in that form. I'd just like to know how tiring that was for you, and why you decided to write it actually in that, I'm going to call it broken English.
Well, we've kind of covered that a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah, so I think, yeah, writing like that, I wanted to divorce myself from the character, because I would have taken an hour of privilege. If I was writing in just standard English, that would be me. I would bleed into that. In a way that I sort of bleed into Tia. If you read Tia's story could be anybody, right? Yes, she has challenges, but that could be me. But I could never be Adunni, and that's because of her voice. And so writing like that allowed me to be able to explore the depths of that character in a way that I would never have been able to, because it means that I could not suddenly say Adunni saw a microwave, because to her it's not a microwave, it's a box with fire in it. So I had to really think hard. And by thinking hard, it allowed me to give her the dignity that she deserves. And not just to tell a story about a girl living in poverty, but it's a girl who has everything and deserves to live the best life she can. Yeah.
Thank you, lovely. So Bernadette, and then I'm gonna come to this side, right, you're next, so Bernadette next, and then over here.
It was just, have we mentioned Khadija, if that's okay then?
Yes.
Oh, we haven't really spoken
No, we
about
haven't.
that.
No, because she was a character in the book, I wanted to cry.
Yeah.
I cried.
But yeah, I thought that was really powerful. Yeah, she was really powerful with it.
And at a point in the story, we're just speaking about Khadija, when she goes off and has a sad ending. I mean, that was a major thing fairly early on in the book. I was thinking, where is it going? Where are you going to take us next?
It's almost kind of towards the end. It's not lost because she's there, but that story quietens down as other stories grow.
Thank you. And Lady wearing orange.
Right, thank you so much. I messaged you on Instagram because I finished reading the book on the train and I was a bit of a mess. Felt as if I had to message you and say the range of emotions I felt at that moment, but for a particular reason, it resonates with me. I'm Nigerian as well. I came to the UK when I was 9, and we had somebody living with us here in the UK, and her experience is very much the way you described somebody else in your experience. Quite a good experience to some extent, but something that resonates with me in the book was around the patriarchy and the role of men in Adunni's life and others as well. So I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, because I could see they were different from her father to Khadija's husband or boyfriend, to Big Madame's husband, Kofi in a slightly different way, the person who drove her to Lagos. They all had different touch that made me really think of the patriarchy. And the reason for that is because when I finished reading the book, I wanted to give it to my mum. And for my mum to read that and have a conversation around the patriarchy in our family, that powerful to me. So I'd love for you to just touch a little bit about that and what inspired those different types of characters thinking about the patriarchy.
So the question is around patriarchy. There is not a single Nigerian man in the story who comes over great. And can you speak about patriarchy?
Thanks for that, and I hope I replied to you.
did, yeah.
So it's interesting because I've had a lot of, I can imagine, I've been in a lot of book clubs and I've had a lot of men sort of come at me for this. We're good men in Nigeria. Like, yes. But you see, it wasn't, to show the extent of the damage that patriarchy has done to us as women from Nigeria. And I know it's across the world, but let's talk about women in Nigeria. Because for me growing up, it wasn't a conscious thing. And in fact, it wasn't until I finished writing and I got feedback. I think it was from one of the people on my literary teams that said, I mean, every single guy in this book is bad. Oh, right. I had to go back and make some subtle changes, maybe apart from Kofi. But the truth is that it's come to a point where women we make excuses for it. We are the gatekeepers, as you can see in some of the women in the story. And it still is an issue, it still is a problem. Women are, if you look at Big Madame, regardless of how excellent her life is in terms of from a financial point of view, successful, she's a gatekeeper and she can't use her voice, she's still silenced. So it's something I wanted to highlight. I don't see a solution to it anytime soon because it's a generational thing. And for me, it feels like the blood that runs through our veins. And the only thing I can do is try to educate my sons or the sons of my children, my friends. And I have conversations with my friends that have boys, and I say to them, it starts with you. It starts with how we raise. Growing up, I remember that I would be my brother will go off to play football and I'll be washing plates in the kitchen. And all through my life, all I heard was, you're going to your husband's house, you have to be X, Y, Z, you have to be prepared for marriage. I don't think anyone ever sat my brother down. I will ask him after this event. I don't think anybody ever sat me down to say, you're going to have a home one day and you need to be prepared for that. We have been conditioned to be prepared for so many things that sort of silence us and sort of put us under intense pressure. And I wanted to show that. And from that comes a sense of entitlement. And yeah, and the evils just continues. So I just wanted to touch on that. And it wasn't a conscious thing, but it was very much a conscious thing.
There's a question from a man.
It doesn't take to enhance the forehead. It's like slightly different take, it's all connected. Your comment about you started with an audience of one. And I've read somewhere that when a writer writes, they write themselves into being. So I'm kind of curious to know if the process of writing has in some way affected your sense of identity or your sense of connection with the place where you were born, because you held up quite a penetrating, sharp mirror against the place you were born. So has it impacted your sense of connection with that place?
And let me just repeat that for the guys on Zoom. So Abi said that when she wrote initially, it was for herself. And as it's grown, you're now so exposed to lots of people. Has it changed your relationship with your audience and with yourself and your own identity?
With that, with the place where you come from?
Yes,
With Lagos.
yeah.
I think if anything, I'm now more on the lookout. So not lookout like scared or anything, but I think I'm more of trying to find opportunities to make a difference. Because I feel that writing a book is a good thing, but what else? What's next? I would never have thought about that before. So now I'm looking at setting up a foundation to help. I'm trying to have conversations with people that have charities and saying, have you thought about finding a way to help maids to get them into education? I'm trying to, so I think it's been a positive thing as opposed to anything else. Because I would just go on holiday and stay in hotels or stay with my mom and, chill and come back. Now I'm going with, I have purpose in every visit to Nigeria now. I'm thinking, what can I do? So I'm speaking to schools and I'm saying I want to come and teach creative writing and help empower. And these are public schools as opposed to very expensive private schools that can afford these things. So I think there's a positive spin to where I see my visits and my relationship with Nigeria. And I hope that I do get to speak to somebody in parliament or something so we can effect change. I think that's the most important thing. I'd like to do that in my lifetime.
So I think I'm looking at the time, it's whizzing by. Have we got time for a couple more? Two more? Two more. So I saw Kirsty and I saw Cara. Sorry, there's a light literally there. So Kirsty, Cara.
Go, we've got one here.
Okay, so
I'll pretty much say, but I'll make answers very
okay, go. Quick.
I'll try to be loud so you don't have to repeat it. But, so it's kind of a bit twofold. So I've got a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old daughter. And I try and keep them educated as much as you ever can with the limited conversation.
Okay, just do it. Go.
But things come up in the media that make it easy to have some conversation. So abortion rights in America comes up in the mainstream media and then we can have the conversation. Very little comes up in the mainstream media about the issues that are discussed in your book. So it's kind of twofold because you said what you're now going to do and you're going to try and get to Parliament and all these wonderful things. What can we do? So we come here, we listen to you, the book's fantastic, we love it. What's the rallying call for us to get these conversations to our girls and have those conversations?
Thanks, Kirsty. That is an excellent question. What can we do? We're asking, what can we do to back you up? We're in your gang.
It's really hard because, what I say to people when they ask me that question is, a few things you can do is support organizations that are financially support organizations, and there's so many that do these things that help to amplify the issues, to solve the problems. There are many organizations that are based in the UK that actually often go back. I'm an ambassador for the Women's Global Education Project. they're based in the United States, but they have a presence in Kenya, and they have real life Adunnis. I've met real life Adunnis that it put through school, and it, I just have goosebumps thinking about it. I remember one of the young girls that I met, and she created a poem out of my book, and she had the louding voice. I mean, she was fire, and giving to community, to charities like that make a difference. But also looking at even just suspecting, I mean, you shouldn't be suspecting, but there might be young children brought from Africa to live with families here, sort of going against the child labor laws, right? If you see that, make a phone call, report that if you do see that, you might be wrong, but it's those things. But I think the biggest thing you can do from here is supporting, amplifying, raising your voice in any way that you can, and through social media and all that would be helpful.
So
Thank
an
you.
amazing
It's a beautiful
question.
yeah.
Thank you, and a lovely answer. And I will ask you for that organisation afterwards. So go, Cara,
You
and then
quickly mentioned that you have to put woman in front of your mother's title to not make people mad, and then you also said that you went to the competition that was anonymous. So what has it been like being a woman author in this space, telling the story, and then on top of that, a Nigerian woman?
So far so good. Maybe because Adunni she's a really lovable character, and I'm not saying that because I created her. I would have said that if anybody else wrote her story. So I think it makes it easier for me. I've been very well received, and I'm so appreciative of the reception I've had. So maybe until my next book, I don't know, but for this one, it's been great. But with my mom made that decision herself. Actually, it wasn't me. She had to put female in front of her title, so that it would generate less controversy.
and there was a question. Hi.
Thank you so much for being here today and for making the book. My name is Quentin, I'm Nigerian. And first one is a statement, the second one is a question. There's an amazing woman, Kelechi Okafor, who's bringing a book out, and she's literally creating a foundation in Nigeria for children, girls, and people who are in Maine. So that's a great connection point for both of you. And she did struggle with publishing her book as well. This comes out this year. The second thing I was going to say is throughout this talk, you have mentioned a lot of women being reflective, a lot of women having that recognition, like, oh my God, have I done this before? Have you, and I'm saying this with a grain of salt, because I understand that rape culture is prevalent everywhere. You can be in Blackpool or Knightsbridge, Lekki or Ikorodu, it's everywhere. Have you had any of your male readers or anyone that's interacted with this book actually had a moment of recognition or solidarity?
Okay, that is a brilliant question. So first of all, can you let us know the organisation that was mentioned? Because I'll share that with everybody at the end. And secondly, have you had readers who have, rather than reflected it, actually had recognition of themselves in their characters? Brilliant question again.
Male readers.
Male readers.
Sorry, male readers, absolutely. Sorry, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
I think that, well, my brother he's quite popular in his circles. So I think he started to infiltrate his WhatsApp groups when the book came out, and he forwarded some responses to me. So not directly, but there were a lot of men in his WhatsApp groups that said, yeah, we saw this, and they had conversations around how many of us knew the birthdays of our housemates. I think that was a very common thing. It was how many of us knew the birthdays of our housemates? How many of us knew, her son name, or what her dreams were, and we're all guilty of this. So he forwarded me a sort of a string of messages from his WhatsApp groups that told me that. But I think majority of the events I've been on, I've had mainly Nigerian women that have. I don't think I've had a lot of men. I don't think so directly.
Change still to come then. The time has gone so quickly. Abi will be outside signing, so there will be time for some questions, but imagine everyone's being signed, even if you had 2 minutes each. Abi does have 2 children that she has to get to. So just be mindful of your time when you get signed. If we feel like we can come to a conclusion, so anyone on Zoom, hello and goodbye. You are amazing, every single person here, because you've read the book, you've got the knowledge. We're all going to do the work. We cannot wait to get another book out. It will squeeze it out of you. We want it, we need it. So should we all give Abi a clap? Um,